program. Complete your training and start getting the support you deserve. Join a peer-led community who will support you every step of the way. Visit Adely.com to learn more.
Carewell.com is the one-stop shop for all your caregiver needs. With knowledgeable care specialists available 24/7 and great prices on thousands of quality products, we focus on helping caregivers so you can focus on your loved ones. Carewell.com. We see you.
Hi, my name is Sierra.
I'm Abraham.
I'm Maya.
I've been driving with Uber for 3 years.
4,000 trips.
6,000 trips.
Work when you want, take breaks when you want.
I'm the boss.
I will not work on my birthday.
When I don't feel like talking to people anymore, it's so easy to just switch to delivery.
Turn on my smooth jazz and just let it go.
Boom!
Billetes, billetes, billetes.
Be there for your kid when they're sick.
You can make your own schedule.
Uber! I can be my own boss. Yes!
Home Thrive is transforming the way we care, making it smarter, easier, and more rewarding for everyone. Whether your employees care for a loved one due to age, disability, or medical condition, our intuitive online platform connects caregivers to personalized advice, as well as live support from our team of compassionate caregiving experts. We help your employees discover a better way forward that prioritizes their loved one's care and their own well-being, so they can thrive at work and at home. Learn more at homethrive.com/TV.
When you have a baby, you have all of these dreams for your child, and they're going to learn how to walk and talk. And then they're going to go off to kindergarten and middle school, and they'll have friends and be active and play in sports and find their interests. And then the assumption is they'll go to high school and graduate, and then hopefully off to college. It's this whole big ball of dreams. But then you have a child with profound disabilities, and it's just like this ball blows up and shatters. And so you have this choice to make. You can choose to sweep away that broken glass and start a new path for you and your child. But it's not a familiar path, and it's not a path that many have to walk on. So people don't understand. And then you wake up to the realization that this world was not made for your child, but you love him or her so much that you'll do whatever it takes to give them the best life possible. And so you just keep going, you keep moving step by step, even though you can't see that far ahead. You have to keep moving forward because your child needs you. It's a lonely path, and often it is you, the caregiver, paving this path all by yourself for your child. I'm part of a blended family. My husband Ryan and I have 8 children, ranging in age from 18 to 5 years old. He brought 3 children to the marriage, and I brought 4, and we had a baby together in 2015.
This would have been a picture of my late wife, Casey, shortly after our 3rd child was born, and she was diagnosed just shortly after that, a couple months later, and passed away just 5 months after that. So it's really quick. It's a whirlwind.
This is my late husband, Jason, and myself and our children. And he, at this point, had been going through cancer for about 2 years. He would pass away a year later in 2010. They actually passed away 4 days.
4 days apart.
In August.
I was really struggling shortly after, especially in August and September, I didn't really know what to expect or what to do. Raising 3 kids on my own, one was still just a baby. I would write on the blog or reach out to other widowers, but got really little input from them. So when Jess reached out to me, I don't really think I had any intentions, just to be able to grieve with somebody and have a better understanding and just have somebody to talk to that can understand. Yeah, I don't know that I had any idea what to expect with Luke. He was still in diapers, but we had 2 others still in diapers too. Went into it blindly. Like, I was in love with this woman and I was led to this life and I was going to embrace it and had no idea what was in store.
Lucas was my second child, and at my 20-week ultrasound appointment, the technician got really quiet and she said, "I'll be right back, I have to get the doctor." He just said, "We have some really bad news. Your unborn child has severe hydrocephalus, and there's very little chance that he or she will survive." We didn't know at the time. And that just became my personal journey of wrestling with my faith and asking God why, and coming to a peace about putting the baby in the Lord's hands. And Lucas was born on August 12, 2004, and this was just a few days after birth. It was so shocking to me that I had a live baby. So I did all of my grieving when I was pregnant, and then he came out alive, and I just didn't care what came along with that. Like, my baby was alive. I'm elated. I don't care what comes along with Lucas at this point, but I'm going home with my baby. That's all that mattered. When Lucas was born, he was this miracle baby because he wasn't supposed to live, and then he made it. People were thrilled and excited to come and help me with this child who God had saved. And so this lasted for a couple of years.
Yeah, you want it? You hot stuff. Ew, keep going. Keep going. Good job.
Hey, Maya. Yeah? His juice is made. It's in the fridge. Okay. Probably shake it up, though, before you give it to him, please. Okay.
Lucas requires 24-hour monitoring. I mean, we got to keep track of him all the time, and you never shut it off.
His needs include primarily nonverbal communication. He needs help in every aspect of his life, bathing, eating, moving from one place to another. Okay. He'll never grow out of these needs. And not only that, as he ages and goes through puberty, that's where it's becoming extremely difficult because of the aggression that we're seeing come out in him.
We watched Luke as he became older and stronger and more strong-willed. Everything changed. Luke wasn't this sweet little boy anymore, and he'd bite and scratch and hit, and we saw that happen. It felt almost like overnight.
The behaviors changed, and he became more aggressive and more difficult, and the screaming intensified. There's no joy in it when your child is just screaming at you all day long and you can't figure out what's wrong. He can't tell you.
You feel like you're in this crazy state of mind all the time, and then home is supposed to be a sanctuary. It just doesn't feel that way. So it builds and builds and builds, and there's nowhere for it to go. So we're just hanging on by a thread most of the time.
And it's those days when he's screaming nonstop, my anxiety levels start to build. And I don't know what the solution is, because when you have a 16-year-old screaming all day long and shaking his gait and trying to break down the walls, the whole family is sort of like walking on eggshells at that point, because we're all trying to make it better.
So if you're in this constant state of unknown anxiety, like what's going to happen next, what could happen next, you're living on the edge all day in this fight or flight mode that you have no control over, and you feel like you're completely out of control all day, every day. So it affects sleep, it affects your attitude, and that fear that's in our minds constantly, it's just always bubbling. What's Luke gonna do next? And it's not his fault, and that's the hardest part. Is it's nobody's fault. It's not our fault. It's not his fault. It's just part of our life as caregivers. We don't have a choice.
Being a caretaker for somebody with profound needs is like sacrificing your life for another person. That sounds extreme, but when you're taking care of somebody else's physical and emotional needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, when that person is your child, of course you love that child more than anything in the world, and you are more than willing to sacrifice. But that doesn't make it any easier.
People probably just can't comprehend just the amount of constant stress that you're under when you are a caregiver.
You're constantly in some form of a survival mode. And when that happens for years upon years upon years, it weighs on you, and it begins to tear away at every aspect of your life. And your mental health is going to change.
You're trapped. It's very lonely. Very lonely.
Being a parent caregiver puts you at more risk for anxiety, depression, and chronic stress. Caregiving in general is stressful. Parent caregiving is stressful because it never stops. It's 24/7. There are studies that show that the more support that the child needs with their daily living activities, the more stressful it is for the parents. But overall, we do see that parent caregivers have mixed feelings, and even though that they adore their children and they love their children, they can still feel stress. Professionals will say, you need to practice self-care, but what we really need is a way to allow the families to get the self-care that they desire. If your child requires additional services and supports, life doesn't stop. We can't just put this on hold. It's a priority and a necessity, so your self-care does take a back seat. And if we don't provide the missing piece of the puzzle, which is communities and resources, then we're not going to be able to see these parents ever get self-care that they desire.
Call it a barn, but it's just kind of a garage. It's just my getaway. It's a makeshift workshop. I come out here and turn the music on, put my headphones in, and I can get away from everything that's going on inside the house or everything that's going on inside my head. I can just focus on what I'm working on in that moment and just drown everything else out. So if I can come out and spend 30 minutes out here, it feels like a half-day rejuvenation. So I can go back in, regrouped, ready to face whatever's coming at me at the house.
think physically, my heart races numerous times a day because that feeling of peace is so elusive and never comes. I'm so aware that I need to pursue peace in my life, and I want it so desperately. But then the second I walk back into my house, there's this high-pitched scream, like jolting me back to reality. This constant wrestling between knowing for my own health and well-being, I need to decrease the stress in my life. I need to get my heart rate down. I need to find peace, but having no idea how to make that happen in my life. I feel it in my body a lot because I think mentally, I always think I can overcome it. I know what to do, but my body doesn't lie. And at 43 years old, my body constantly aches. And I am absolutely convinced that it's due to the stress in my life. My joints, my knees, my fingers. I'm 43 years old and I'm in pretty decent shape. And I eat healthy and I take care of myself, and my body always hurts. There's not an answer. Like I said, I know the steps to take, but it doesn't alleviate what goes on in our home.
I went through these periods where I was in the ER twice in 1 week because I thought I was having a heart attack because I couldn't catch my breath, and it was just this constant build of anxiety that they couldn't even label it. Even when I was there, I said, it's not a heart attack. I know it's not my heart, but I can't control my breathing. So then they would just say, well, it's not your heart. You got to change something in your life. Okay. You want to come home with me and help me make that change? Because we can't make that change.
You put your kids first for everything. But when you've got so many appointments and so many therapy sessions and people in and out of your house to do this and do that, you kind of forget to take care of yourself.
It's really hard to have people preach about taking care of yourself, looking out for you, making that me time. I'm like, what me time? I sit down to read a book. I've got to watch, my daughter's oxygen stats. If we don't have a nurse at home, I've got to suction her, or I've got to take my son to therapy, or I've got to do therapeutic activities with him. So there just isn't time for you at the end of the day. It's all them.
The stress that had started led to insomnia, severe mood swings, avoidance. And as I read the symptoms of PTSD, I realized, my God, I'm going through this.
You have to find this balance, and you just can't, because there is no balance. It's an all or nothing situation almost every single day.
Just as the stress was starting to go up with dealing with different things, I had a stress-induced heart attack at 30 years old.
Parent caregivers are more prone to different physical illnesses because of their mental health. We are not targeting this population. We're not screening them appropriately. Professionals don't look at them the same way as the identified patient, which is the child who has a disability. So practitioners and professionals don't screen them the same way as the mother who has a newborn, for example. She goes back to her doctor and she's screened for postpartum depression. Or maybe the returning veteran is screened for PTSD because they're more prone to be at risk for those diagnoses. So we're looking for that to make sure that we're treating them appropriately and they're getting the resources they need. We're not doing that with this population, and that's really unfortunate. They are unseen, and they deserve more attention, more mental health resources, and more interventions for the family because it's going to benefit them and the family unit, which in turn helps everybody.
Society is only as healthy as the caregivers. Honestly, like, we're all going to be in a caregiving role at some point in our lives. If you want a healthy society, you need to take care of the caregiver's needs in order to have healthy children. And that's not just the children with disabilities, it's all the siblings that are also involved in these families. So to begin with the caregiver, it goes back to my motto, the child is only as healthy as the caregiver.
There is no burden of a child. It is the burden of our society failing these families. They're not being given enough resources. They're not being provided any continuous care, and we're neglecting the family system, and we're neglecting these parent caregivers and the well-being of these parent caregivers, which is a shame because in the end, it affects that child. So if you truly care about children with disabilities, you need to also care about the parent caregivers.
When Lucas started to go through puberty, we lived in rural America, very isolated. There were no resources for him, and no special needs ministries and churches, no accessible playgrounds, just nothing. Not only is there no plan, but there are no options, and all the options have waiting lists miles long.
You know, we ran into wall after wall after wall. These doors just kept slamming in our faces.
I called probably 40 different daycare, camp, after school options, and not one would take Luke, primarily because he was in diapers. And they said, we don't have the training, we don't have the staff who can manage that. Even special needs camps would ask, they'd have a questionnaire and you'd have to check off, you know, what he's capable of, and incontinence, and nope, we don't take children who are in diapers. That's when I realized, in calling every daycare option, there wasn't a daycare facility or even a private person who would take him for after school. They're not looking for kids like Lucas who need complete and total care when they're at camp with them. If you don't even have the option of special needs camps, I don't know where you go as a parent. And I've heard this repeatedly from other caregivers. I'm making these calls and my heart is racing. I can feel it in my whole body. My whole body aches because I think it's in this fight or flight constant, because I feel like I'm failing my child. And then as the anger piles on, there's a feeling of I'm failing my family. I'm feeling completely dejected, and anger is bubbling. That's my go-to emotion, is I just get angry. I get angry at the system. I get angry that there's nothing for my child. It doesn't seem fair. I don't understand it. Why 7 of my other kids could have a camp to go to, but my 16-year-old who I need help with more than any other child, I cannot find anybody or any facility willing to take him.
I think our society really struggles with taking care of each other. I think our society doesn't give a priority to taking care of the vulnerable, and that's shown with the lack of funding and how our systems are not easy to navigate, and it's not a simple process to get the supports that families need. What we need is our system, the larger system, to focus and provide respite care and supports for the family, not just the child. The actual family is suffering because we are not doing that currently.
It makes me feel hopeless sometimes. It makes me realize just how the government does not care and how we're pretty much alone. We're kind of out here alone in the abyss of full-time caregiving.
I've seen so much in my 9 years of caregiving, almost 10, and it's no fair. It's no fair. But you gotta live your life and do the best that you can, however you can, to make it through. Because if you don't, who's gonna do it?
You want to go to the park today? Luke? Hey. You want to go on a bear hunt?
Once he went through puberty, that's when the challenges felt like they were unsurmountable, where we couldn't overcome. It felt like there was no solution at that time.
Nobody wants to help anymore with a 16-year-old in diapers.
Well, not even a 13-year-old.
No.
At that point, when he first went through puberty, it was uncomfortable. And I think it was even uncomfortable for us to ask somebody. We didn't even want to ask for help because it was such a unique circumstance. There was just nobody that we felt comfortable with, even asking.
Right. Well, we had some really bad experiences with help too, which made us a little bit skittish. And I've heard that resounding story with a lot of special needs families too, that the help that you do get, they're so underpaid and so underqualified and don't have the education necessary to care for a child like this, that they almost make the situation worse.
Yeah.
A lot of the times.
There were some good ones, but what we noticed is when they were good at it, they moved on very quickly into another field.
Right. And finally we were done after 2 years because the stress of that many people in and out of your house, and some of them did some pretty horrible things. So we just decided not to pursue that anymore.
Many direct caregivers are actually caregivers themselves and lack the supportive workplace policies in their industries. And when we talk about the availability of direct care workers, that often leads to questions about what supports are in place for them when it comes to wages, the industry, staffing, and hour scheduling. So I think there's a lot to be said about how can we include supports for direct care services, as well as how do we observe their role in this caregiving crisis.
If they are actually paid better, then we'll have more quality service and more providers in that helping field. The same way that teachers are underpaid and special education's understaffed, there's a reason for that. It's a tough job sometimes, and we need to be able to fund that more appropriately so there's less burnout.
When we value the work of providing care, which has long been marginalized by sexism and racism in this country, we as a nation become stronger and healthier for it.
We've always had to have a lot of flexibility when it comes to making money. That's just something Ryan and I have always known, like we need to piece together this living and we have to somehow be self-employed with our life because there are so many variables and unexpected occurrences that happen all the time. You know, for instance, like Luke ended up in ICU for about 6 weeks last year and we had to kind of drop everything.
I couldn't work a 40-hour-week job and be away from the house all the time because kids were getting off the bus. And when you have a big family, you have to make some of those sacrifices anyway. But with Luke, it just changes everything. If he's sick or he has an appointment at the neurologist, or I can't call in sick, I can't call into the boss and say, hey, I didn't know this, but I'm going to be in ICU for the next 6 weeks. You know, it's just not an option. So to be able to work for myself was something I always wanted to do, and this made it an absolute. Like, it wasn't really a choice. There aren't that many forgiving bosses that can say you can take 6 weeks off and then come back when you feel like it, or when you're available again. It's not going to happen.
So many workplaces and policymakers are not sure about the burden that many caregivers have, and that's because they're often ignored in conversations, policies are made without them, and also caregivers are also suffering in silence. So a lot of this work goes behind the scenes at home, and so that often is left out of conversations in the workplace. And I think it's important for us to bridge that gap in policy and ensure that we're talking about what caregivers are struggling through when we're making policies like paid family and medical leave or caregiver discrimination. So that way, the policies are not just made, but they're also effective in ensuring that workers, not just women, but men as well, can take the time off they need when their family members are going through a crisis.
Just between managing their appointments and meetings and checkups and therapies, there's just no way that I could work outside the home without losing my job. And I think this is the reality for a lot of families that have children with additional needs. One parent usually has to give up their career to manage everything that comes with that.
I was told that I could have a career or I could adopt my daughter. So we adopted our daughter. Once again, never looked back on it. I've become a full-time stay-at-home parent, and that has entailed everything from chasing insurance companies on the phone, spending hours in therapy, driving to and from, and for the last 6 months, pretty much sitting in a hospital room at our local children's hospital.
I left my corporate job. My background is in IT, but I had to leave my job just because the demand for Janelle's needs were getting a little bit extreme. And I had to choose what was more important, me working or her development, and I chose her development.
When we talk about who is handling the care for their families or for sick loved ones, elder care and child care, that does majorly fall on women. So women are disproportionately leaving the workforce and being negatively affected by this crisis of care. You really have no choice at all, when you're having to choose between your paycheck or spending time and caring for your loved one. And that really does leave a lot of families on the line in terms of economic security. Now, if they are caring for a loved one that has a disability, the Americans with Disabilities Act does cover them in terms of facing discrimination, but there's not an explicit right to receiving reasonable accommodations to care for your loved one that has a disability. And this could include time off, this could include flexible scheduling, or even a minor accommodation like working from home. Many caregivers love their job. They just want to be able to ask for accommodations and receive the time off they need so that they can care for their families as well.
Walk. I know. You don't want to. It's all right. We're going to go for a walk. Okay? No, we're going to go for a walk. We gotta put these on. Go to the park and go slide.
Remember your manners? More, please.
When we go out with Luke, he's typically pretty excited to be out and about. And we still get a lot of those sympathetic, like, "Aw, like, that's so sweet. You're taking your son for a walk." I think it's more of a sympathetic, like, "Aw," rather than the judgment, typically. However, if Luke is not in a good mood that day and he starts screaming and hair pulling and scratching, trying to get his way, I immediately am scoping, like, who's watching this and how is it being perceived? And my heart starts racing, like, are we gonna have cop cars here in a few minutes because they're not understanding that, A, this child has profound special needs, and are they gonna blame him? Are they gonna blame me? My mind goes in a million different directions, and I'm very, very conscious of every single person within our circle at that moment in time. So I think we often find that we just stay home, which can make the special needs journey very isolating and exhausting because your house begins to feel like a tomb a little bit because you're just holed up at home trying to manage these needs and trying not to appear scary to the rest of the world.
I think what's eye-opening for a lot of people is when we had to isolate and quarantine during the pandemic, so many people struggled, and we saw an increase of depression because of the isolation. That's how a lot of our parent caregivers live for years. We had to quarantine briefly. This is how a lot of parents are living in their day-to-day lives, is staying home as their 24/7 caretaker for their child. And they stay home because it's difficult to go in the community because our community is making it really hard to do things out there.
You get to the point where these behaviors become so common, you don't leave your house anymore. And when it starts controlling every aspect of your life, it starts controlling every aspect of you. It starts controlling every aspect of your children's life, your extended family, everybody around you, it controls.
Even a grocery run is hard. And then you have people staring at you like, get a hold of your kids, or, giving you that, like, and shaking their head. And
sometimes I feel people stare. Your child's too big to be in a stroller, or like, why are you still feeding him? He should be able to feed himself. So like on the outside, our boys look very typical and their disabilities are invisible. So I feel like there's sometimes misunderstanding or judgment that comes from people that are just observing us as a family.
I don't need anyone telling me or passing judgment, because I am my own worst critic. I am hard on myself already. And I'm doing the best that I can.
People can think what they want to think and turn their faces away from us or like avert their eyes because it's kind of a strange situation and they don't know how to respond. So I don't know that Luke needs acknowledgement, but I think it would be nice if we would get that acknowledgement. Or you have a beautiful family, or something like that. I don't feel invisible. It's hard to be invisible with a child like Luke and 7 other kids. but I do feel unseen because they have to make a concerted effort to like avert their eyes or turn their face away and make that effort to not acknowledge us. So that's very different than feeling invisible. Ignorance is bliss. She's fine, he's fine, they're fine. And we plaster our smiles on our faces and pretend like everything's fine. And we just can't do that anymore because most caregivers are not fine and they're not doing well.
It's stressful. It's really, really, really stressful because she is my child and I do worry about her so much. And the older we get, the more concerned I am that how long are my husband and I going to be able to do this?
It's taxing on your body and it's taxing on your mind because you don't just live in that moment. My mind thinks about, oh my gosh, what if I'm not even here? Who's going to take care of my child?
Nothing can happen to me or my husband. We can't get sick. We can't die. Our son needs us 24 hours a day. And that's a heavy burden. It's a lot.
Our parenting and caregiving for Jacob will continue indefinitely. And that's just overwhelming. Think about not because we don't want to do that for him, but because there's so many things you have to plan for. Financially, you try to envision your future. And it looks so different than what I thought it would.
We need more agencies, and I think we need more funding to support the family systems as they plan for what happens when these parent caregivers pass away, because this is such an issue, and so many parents are so worried about what's going to happen to their child who has a disability and needs all these extra supports. And we want to provide the appropriate care, but who's going to do that? And how is this going to impact my other child's life if they become the caretaker?
This keeps me up at night, just wondering, I think, how much longer I can physically do this as he gets older, and feeling like my body hurts so much already at 44 years old. I don't know what that looks like at 54 years old, and how that impacts my ability to care for him.
I don't make 5-year plans anymore. I live by today and tomorrow and hope that tomorrow comes. And then a year from now, who knows? I mean, no, you can't think too far ahead. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work anymore.
We don't have any other option other than to just keep going. And she has experienced so many challenges already in her relatively short amount of time on this planet. And to me, my job as a parent is to give my child the best quality of life I absolutely can. And unfortunately, that often means at the expense of my own quality of life. But I don't see any other way around it. I want my daughter to have experiences. I want her to be in good health and see the best doctors. And that means keeping going, even when you're exhausted, even when you're struggling with your mental health, even when there's not support. You just keep going because you have to for your child.
I, as her mom, want the best for her, and I want her to have a good experience every day. And if I'm not feeling that good either because of the exhaustion of caregiving, then of course that affects the quality of her support.
I think about my son, and if this child that struggles so much to do things that come so simply for other kids. I mean, he's got academic struggles and social struggles and medical struggles. If this kid can wake up every day, put one foot in front of the other, and take on the day with such strength and bravery, and with many times a smile, then so can I. So he is what keeps me going. When things get tough, I think about him, and he inspires us, and he's amazing. So if he can do it, if he can go through what he goes through, the hard days, then so can I.
What motivates me to keep going is that I want the best for her, and I want to be able to do it all, and I want to change the way the system is designed. It's heartbreaking to me to think that this is the best we can do. I just know we can do better.
At the end of all this, I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. Even here at like 2 o'clock in the morning, because this is the only time I get to myself, like right now. I can still smile because there are happy times, there are happy moments. They laugh. We all laugh. And those are the times I hold on to. And those are the times that are worth fighting for. Those are the times that keep me going.
In order for our society to grow and come together and support these children with disabilities, we have to pay attention to the family system. And those parent caregivers are the first step in the family system.
At some point in our lives, whether we are younger or older, we're going to either become a caregiver for our family members or need care for ourselves. It really is important for folks to get involved in what policies around caregiving look like, no matter what.
I think it begins with seeing us. Stop turning your head, because we all know that family. And you need to first accept the fact that their life is probably very difficult and challenging. People don't understand when you're in a situation where you have a child with special needs, your to-do list is probably 5 times longer than another family's to-do list, because the needs of your child are so intense and so all-consuming and never end, plus the needs of running a household, plus the needs of your other children. So even to alleviate a couple of those little things off that to-do list whatever they may be, are so appreciated. And it fuels us as caregivers just to know that, like, people are seeing us. They're seeing us.
Just talk to the family. Talk to mom and dad and say, what can I do? What do you need help with? What have you been wanting to get done? And let me help you. And that would be the biggest blessing to a family.
I think as a caregiver, there are so many specific tasks that we can only do on our own. And so anyone who can take off a task that they can do from our load, our mental load, is extremely helpful.
Don't ask me to pray. Don't ask to pray for me. You know, that's like, you know, did I forget to pray? No, I pray all the time. Just ask if I need some help. You know, just stand with me for a minute and listen to me. Just listen to me. That's really all I need.
People who are a caregiver, sometimes they get consumed with all that's going on within their day, like trying to manage work, trying to manage a household, trying to manage kids. Check on them. We may seem strong and like we can handle everything no matter what comes our way, but sometimes we need to be checked on too, because we're always checking on somebody else.
They always say the road to hell is paved with good intention. And I think it really is. People step forward and say, oh, we want to do something. You know, we'll do this for your family, or we'll do that. And they never follow through. We get a lot of lip service. We get told how much they love our kids, how brave we are, and what wonderful saintly parents we are. But it's lonely being a saint. It's really hard. I'm not a saint. I'm a human being, and I still have needs.
Respite. We desperately need respite. Whenever we have just even a short time away together to clear our mind, it can change everything.
People, ask, do you need any help? Organizations, open your mind, expand your horizons. Nobody says you have to know everything about the condition, but at least be receptive to people who need the help. My hand is up.